A military coup in Gabon. Celebrations on the street, but a very different reaction globally. The takeover is being condemned by the UN, while China, Russia, the US, and EU all voice concern. So why has there been yet another coup in Africa? And what's the response of African states? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. The president of Gabon, Ali Bongo, didn't have long to celebrate his election victory this week. Within minutes of the declaration that he'd won a third term, army officers announced they were taking over. The election was controversial without international observers or journalists, with the country's borders sealed. Bongo has been president since 2009, succeeding his father, who was in power since 1967. General Brice Oligui Nguema takes over as transitional leader, the army saying it wants to bring stability.
Président de la transition.
The president of the transition insists on the need to maintain calm and serenity in our beautiful country. He pledges to preserve the economic tools that guarantee social prosperity at the dawn of a new era. We will guarantee the peace, stability, and dignity of our beloved Gabon.
President Ali Bongo is under house arrest. In an online message, he pleaded for support.
I don't know what's going on, so I'm calling you to make noise, really. I'm thanking you. Thank you.
We'll explore more with our guests in a moment, but first, our correspondent Nicholas Hawk has more from Senegal's capital, Dakar.
There's popular support for this coup because people have been expecting and waiting for the downfall of the Bongo family dynasty that have been at the helm of this country for over 55 years. What comes as a surprise is the man behind this coup, Brice Oligui Nguema, who is the head of the presidential guard meant to protect the interest of the Bongo family. He was in fact a close aide to Omar Bongo, the father of Ali Bongo, and then in 2009 when Ali Bongo came to power, he was sidelined, sent as defense attaché to Dakar, Senegal, and also to Morocco. During that time, the young colonel amassed quite a lot of wealth, building multi-million-dollar homes in the United States and in Gabon. Now he's distancing himself from the Bongo family, arresting his son, accusing them of treason, of abusing power, of corruption, and of stealing from state coffers from this oil-rich nation in which most people live on less than $2 a day. So distancing himself, but also appeasing foreign interest, the French and the Chinese who have vested interest in the oil business and also in the mineral business. We haven't heard from the opposition, Jean Ping, but also Albert Onda Ossa, who's been the political opponent to Ali Bongo during Saturday's presidential election. Also muted reaction from the regional countries, from Equatorial Guinea, but also from Cameroon. Not a surprise, because they probably fear contagion of coups. Paul Biya has been in power since 1982, and President Obiang has been in power since 1979. But this coup is a break from the past and a hope that this can rebuild trust in the democratic institutions in Gabon. Nicholas Hawk for Inside Story.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guests. In Libreville, capital of Gabon, is Antoine Lawson. He's a veteran journalist who's reported on Africa and Gabon for more than 3 decades. In Arusha, in Tanzania, is Stella Agara. She's an analyst on African government affairs. And in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, is Lassane Ouedraogo, research fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development there. His work focuses on governance in West Africa. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Antoine, let me start with you today. There was jubilation across Gabon after news of the coup. You are there in Libreville. Where do things stand now?
Yes, the situation is very calm after the coup 2 days before. And the new commander-in-chief of the coup, Brice Oligui, Nguema, is now the president of the transition since yesterday. Okay, everything is starting to be very quiet today, and everything, the business has opened this morning, and they ask all the population to continue to do what they have to do every day. So what is new today is that the former minister and economist, Mr. Raymond Ondimba, tried to speak to the group of military officers today and ask them it was a good idea to interrupt the electoral process, and they asked them how long they are going to stay in power before they put the civil or Mr. Professor who won the election 2 days before. So the situation is still confused regarding how to lead the country, because in a response of the coup, the military says that the country is going through several institutional political crises, but now the military does not know how to lead the country. This is the more important situation now in Gabon.
Lassane, after the coup, we heard expressions of concern and condemnation from the UN, from France, the US, African leaders, Russia, China, and the EU. What does it mean that there is such rare international consensus on this issue within today's very polarized world?
Absolutely. I feel like the international community is caught in this coup, whereby in principle they have to condemn the coup, but at the same time it's kind of like, okay, we understand what is going on here. It's almost as if the coup is coming to relieve people from a situation whereby Ali Bongo was to win the election in a very, very controversial manner, and we don't know what could have come out of that election either in terms of post-election violence. But the coup stepped in to actually set things back to zero, basically.
Stella, General Nguema, who was named as the transitional leader, he was head of the presidential guard that had pledged to protect President Bongo. He's also related, as I understand it, to the deposed leader. The fact that such a close aide to President Bongo has now been appointed to lead the transition, what message does that impart to those inside and outside the country?
Thank you very much. And I think there are a number of things we need to consider about that appointment. One is the possibility that the more things change, the more they will remain the same. And this is truly dependent on whether Nguema himself is loyal to the deposed president or if he's truly committed to change. Sometimes you could find family members who are in total disagreement with how or why their family members do certain things. But if it's in alignment, it then means this will be a coup, in vain, so to say. And the other thing that it says is that there's a possibility that the negotiations that are happening may impact what or the desired change in different ways. For example, for the locals, one of the things that they must do now is to manage their expectations, to stop celebrating and to find a way to communicate their interests and communicate the demands that they had for this change, if this is what they desired, especially evidenced by the celebrations we have seen amongst them. But for foreign nations, it may also present an opportunity for some of the foreign nations that have been interfering or at least influencing politics in Gabon to continue working with this gentleman to advance the agenda that they have been advancing in the region. Unfortunately, some of that agenda is not good for the country, and so they need to check to ensure that as they transition, this does not find its way into the other side of this conversation once they're able to return to constitutional order, which we kind of hope that they're going to do very soon.
Antoine, picking up on some of what Stella just said, the fact that General Nguema is part of the elite in Gabon. Are there those in Gabon who are worried that this will mean that it's just more of the same going forward?
Yes, I think Mr. Nguema is a cousin of the Ali Bongo, the former president, and the Bongo era is continued because it's the same family, in fact. The Bongo has run the country since more than 50 years already, but I think if Brice Clotaire, Oligui Nguema stay in power again, this means that the era of Bongo continue to lead the country. It's the reason why Ali Bongo was not killed. He could have been killed after the coup, but I think they found some arrangement, and the team tried to avoid the chaos in Gabon. Okay, what is very important is what is going after this coup. We don't think that military officers are able to lead the country as maybe the former team used to do that, because there is no minister, everything was, there is no minister, the Senate, everything, it was cancelled in Gabon, and the coup leader said the president is arrested in his residence, and you have seen yesterday, for example, the president was able to send a video on the internet. I think that they've made some arrangements.
Stella, I saw you reacting to some of what Antoine was saying there, and it looked like you wanted to jump in, so please go ahead.
So the reason why I was reacting to what he was saying is because we definitely know that, for example, the president got assistance to send out that information if he was under house arrest at the palace by the military. But more importantly is the fact that he was calling on individuals outside of the country to come out and support him. He was calling on individuals outside the country to make noise. When you start calling on people outside your country to make noise, it basically means you do not trust entirely that you have that kind of legitimacy on the ground. And the question is, what contentions do his people have against him? We already know about the number of years he has been in power, the need for change of guard in the country, the interest of the country in ensuring that then their own interests are taken care of. But speaking of calling on people outside the country, there are very many foreign governments that have spoken on this matter. There are very many foreign voices that have come in, and when I say foreign, I mean both international and African Union, ECOWAS voices that have spoken on this matter. They all have very specific interests. We have governments around this country that are desperately in need of ensuring that this thing that is happening in Gabon, previously happened in Niger, does not transfer to happen in their countries. I was just interacting with some information just before the broadcast about changes that are being made in Cameroon to ensure that then the defense force has a different kind of leadership. So they're panicking. And then apart from panicking, there's also the sense that this unconstitutional change of government thing is going to become a thing in the continent. We have a lot of dictators. But then there's another group of people who are coming into this conversation, like the government of France, who then are protecting their interest in something that most of those countries are fighting against.
Right, Lassane, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to pick up on that point you're making about France and France's relationship with Gabon, but I also want to go to Lassane and pick up on another thing you mentioned. Lassane, Stella was talking also about the coup that happened just about 5 weeks ago in Niger, and I want to ask you how different it is what transpired in Niger versus what happened in Gabon.
You see, the Gabon coup, there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot that we don't know yet about the Gabon coup, but what we can also see in terms of a comparison with the coup in Niger is that this is more likely a very ceremonial coup d'etat, a coup d'etat whereby, you know, there has not been any internal opposition. And contrarily to the coup in Niger, we have not seen people come out in protest holding foreign flags, Russian flags, unlike what we've seen in the Sahel. So basically, the reaction of the Gabonese people was in terms of, okay, now we are getting rid of this dynasty that has been in power for so long, but there's no discourse at least for the moment, I haven't seen any response from the Gabonese people in terms of saying, okay, we are defending our interests. We are going to do anything to defend our interests. And if you listen to the appeal that Bongo issued on a video call, he did it in English, not in French. I understand that Gabon is now part of the Commonwealth, which is also something to consider here. Why is Gabon, a former French colony, a member of the Commonwealth? What has been going on in terms of the Franco-Gabonese relationship to the point where Gabon will seek to join the Commonwealth? So I think if we go back a few years ago when, maybe not a few years, a few months ago when Macron visited Gabon to talk about climate change and everything, the Gabonese people's reaction to the arrival of the president of France was also showing signs that there is a disconnection between, or at least there's a departure from what we had always known as France in Africa.
Lassane, let me also ask you, sorry to interrupt, but let me also ask you further about the reactions that we've heard thus far from African leaders and institutions. On Wednesday, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, he's the current chair of the West African bloc, ECOWAS. He said he was working closely with other African leaders to contain what he called a contagion of autocracy spreading across Africa. Time after time when these coups happen, and there have been a lot of coups, as we mentioned earlier recently, we see condemnation from African leaders, and we hear talk of proposals to try to settle these disputes and end these crises, but not much seems to happen. Why have these institutions and leaders not been more effective?
I think that these institutions have failed fundamentally to address the symptoms, the reason, the root causes of coup d'etats. They rather come late to address the symptoms when the disease is already in. And today, it's sad to say it, but it's no longer a matter of what is next. We can even say it's a matter of who is next, because we see a number of African countries where the situation is not good at all. The situation, the governance situation is very bad. And our regional organizations are not reacting to that. They are not reacting and saying, look, the elections is not going well. Even Tinubu himself, it has not been, he has been recently elected, but the election has issues. Fortunately, the Nigerian people took the case to the court. And that is being decided while the president has sworn in to be a president. I think that itself is a very problematic issue that our regional organization, African Union, needed to address. But since we failed to address those, what comes next when the military see an opportunity to seize power? And we shouldn't forget that those are also citizens, and they have families who are members of our communities, and they understand the predicament in which those kind of poor leadership is taking them into.
Antoine, often when news of these coups emerge, there's a lot of talk about democratic backsliding in a volatile region. I want to ask you if it's fair to mention that in the context of what happened in Gabon, because there had been a lot of allegations that fraud had taken place in the elections over the weekend. The Bongo family has ruled Gabon for 56 years. So is it actually accurate to say that the coup is evidence of erosion of democracy in Gabon?
But I don't think so. The main problem in Gabon is that the population is getting poor and poor. This is a population, Gabon is a population of less than 2 million inhabitants, and the half of the population is living in the capital, Libreville. There is 9 regions in Gabon, but Libreville, the capital, there is about around 1 million inhabitants in Libreville. And the people are living it's very difficult for the everyday living, for the families, and they don't understand why there is a group of people in power. They use the money and they spread the money, and they don't have anything to eat, for example, because in Gabon, there are some families that don't have more than $2 a day for the everyday living. The country is rich. We have oil, we have wood, and there's some raw material like manganese, but it was possible for what we have in Gabon to be able to have a very good country like in Libya, for example. Gabon was one of the richest country in Africa, and now you see there is in Equatorial Guinea there is some more development. The population is small, but they have enough money. But the money in Gabon is not distributed very equally to all the sections of the population. This is a problem. People are not glad for it, but they think that this coup maybe can bring something better. But I am not sure because the people, the military on the power now, maybe they don't know how to run the country.
Stella, I had interrupted you earlier when you were starting to make a point about Gabon's relationship with France. Gabon, like Niger, was also a former French colony. Gabon is one of France's closest allies in the region. How much influence is France losing across the region at this point?
I'm glad you asked that question, and I'm glad you interrupted me so that this conversation could go around, because I want to pick up from where Antoine has left. Gabon has been led by this family dynasty for over 55 years. And so it is not that is the main trigger now for them to get rid of their president. The environment is ripe for a coup because of the other circumstances that are leading to this. We are coming out of a pandemic. We are currently at the center of a global economic recession, and these people have to figure out how to survive. The relationship with France is such that Gabon is one of the nations that has been paying colonial tax to the government of France, up to the tune of 500 billion USD. That is not small money, considering that it's collected from 14 of the poorest nations in the region. Gabon happens to be a very wealthy country, and I think Antoine has mentioned about their wealth in manganese, timber, and oil, etc. And so they're definitely paying a lot out, and yet their people are staying hungry. At some point, when you push an individual and you push a citizen to the wall, eventually there are going to be knee-jerk reactions. And part of the reason why France is losing influence in the region is because all of those countries are beginning to ask, why do we have wealth? Why do we have resources and we have to pay so much outside? That, of course, could explain why there are military coups, but apart from having military coups, there's resistance also to the voice of France asking them about anything, or at least taking a moral high ground on their situation. And you have seen those kinds of situations repeating themselves, even to the point of Niger. France is losing influence because this thing that they continue to do is an injustice to those countries. Even if you are collecting compensation for what you built in a country during at the time when you're colonizing them, surely you cannot collect compensation in perpetuity. Number two is that the influence that has been held over that region has not changed the region in any way. In any case, it has continued to put these people under abject poverty, with people living on less than $1 or $2 a day. And of course, that kind of indignity cannot be sustained or accepted by humans for a very long time. At some point, it has to stop. Unfortunately, the people who suffer are the women and the children in the society, because coups generally do not recognize the interests of women and children, and many of them do not rise to the top even after a coup.
Lassane, we spoke a little bit earlier about the international condemnation that we've heard thus far from several international actors. I want to ask you, where do you see this going forward when it comes to the reaction in the days, weeks, and months ahead from the international players? And is there an international actor that would be able to step in from your vantage point and actually try to resolve any of this?
I think the international community involvement in Gabon will be purely based on specific interests that each one of those countries have in Gabon. When the Chinese issue a statement, they condemn the coup, but they do not address the question of the election, whether the election was fair and transparent. Nobody is talking about that. And in that matter, the opposition and the the Gabonese people are the losers in this story. When the French condemn the coup, they do not condemn it the same energy which they have used to condemn the coups in Niger and elsewhere. When the rest of the West condemned the coup, including African Union. And, it's just a basic way of saying, look, in principle, we do not agree with coup d'etats. But I'm quite sure that all of these international actors are going to find ways to maintain the system, there will not be a lot of pressure on this military regime to transition quickly toward to give power to civilians. And if they do that, they will also work toward maintaining the same status quo that allowed the international partners, which I believe are equally liable to the suffering of the Guinean, of the Gabonese people, in as much as they have been involved for many years working with Bongo father and Ali Bongo. It's so unfair to the Gabonese people when you think that this nation is extremely rich in natural resources and only has 2 million people. That is, for God's sake, less than the size of the population of Abuja or Lagos or Ouagadougou for that. So it doesn't make sense that with such a small number of people, we are unable to meet the basic needs. And at the same time, you are collaborating with nations that claim to be democratic. It doesn't make any sense. It's just ridiculous. And in international relations.
Lassane, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are very much running out of time. We only have about a minute and a half left, and I just want to give the last word to Antoine, because he is there in Libreville on the ground. Antoine, please keep in mind we only have about a minute and a half left. I just want to ask you about the fact that the military is promising stability. From your vantage point and from what you're hearing from others in Gabon, do you think that's possible?
I think it is possible. If you have to be optimist, what can be done for the country. But I think that France, President Macron has to change the way they lead the politics in the African French-speaking countries. This is very important because what they are doing in Africa since maybe 50 years to take everything from African community and say, don't give nothing in return. This is very important to develop a country. There is something the French people, the French government has to do, and they know now things are changing. And what happened in Niger, in Burkina Faso, everything moved now in Central Africa, in Gabon. Maybe in a few months, in a few years, something will happen in Equatorial Guinea or in Congo. This is certain, because this is a very good position for Africans to make politics, and this is not good for the democratic view of the African countries. This is a shame to see that now people cannot live, and they are very rich, the country is rich, and people cannot have, there is no student. 80% of the students in Gabon are learning in Europe, in America, in Canada. There is no university in Gabon.
Antoine, I am sorry to cut you off, but we have run out of time. Thanks so much to you and all of our other guests, Antoine Lawson, Stella Agara, and Lassane Ouedraogo. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.